Welcome to Starting Up.
The podcast for founders by founders.
We're talking to startups, scale-ups, and the people actually building things.
In the Netherlands and around the world.
No fluff.
No gatekeeping.
Just real stories from real founders.
Got something you're building?
We want to hear it.
Hi everyone, I'm Quint Wiersma, 32 years old, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spelee. And at Spelee, we're all about building this digital speech assistant, AI-driven, for children with language and speaking disorders.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Maybe good to introduce. First of all, you just did the introduction in the video.
Yes.
But I already know you, so I'm happy that you're here. First of all, welcome. And maybe it's nice that you can also tell a bit more about what you do to work on.
Yeah, of course.
And about.
Yeah,
anyway,
of course.
And the people listening.
So hi everyone, I'm Quint. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spelee. And we build an AI-driven speech assistant for children with language and speaking disorders. And most of the time I say after that, that's a mouthful. So we're building an app for children that go through speech therapy because they have a speech impediment, a speech problem. And we're building it for the children and for the speech therapists. So we're not there as an AI solution, which you hear a lot, right, sort of to place people out of the market. No, we're there to support both sides of the equation of speech therapy. So it's always a human. The speech therapy is very necessary, and we're there to support this whole process of having the children getting better and getting better quicker. Yeah.
That's very cool. Yeah, when it comes to AI facilitation, I think the big conversation that we hear a lot is replacement theory versus technology facilitating humans working better.
Yeah.
And so maybe the first thing I would think about is was this the approach from the beginning? Where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so it was in a sense the idea from the beginning to support, right? Sort of to not take over. So I think they call it the centaur and the reverse centaur model, right? So centaur, the AI supports humans, and the other thing the other way around. But where it originally came from is that actually in the Netherlands, speech therapists have a waiting list, and actually a lot of them have a waiting list, like 85%. And of those, 50% have a waiting list that is longer than 6 months. And if you then take into consideration that these children are normally 3 to 7 years old, that's the majority, then 6 months is a lifetime. For us, right, I already find it annoying if you have to wait one extra day for a package, but imagine you have to wait for something serious an extra half a year. So that's really a problem. And this came to us actually, one of my old colleagues at the university at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, he's Portuguese. And he spoke Portuguese at home. He lived here for 20 years, didn't speak Dutch. He understands it very well, but he doesn't speak it. And his children went to Dutch schools. So they actually heard many different languages, and therefore they had a problem. And in many of them, so in Portuguese, they had a bit of a speech problem, in Dutch, in English, in all these languages. And so they went through speech therapy, and then they noticed that they had to actually wait very long. So they were on the waiting list for quite long. And then he came to me and he was like, hey, we just did a project together with something AI related, machine learning for an outside company, another startup. And he said, hey, shouldn't we be able to also help these children, help my children build something that can actually support them in practicing? And that's how it all started. So we thought of it really as a starting practicing tool for these children, because the main thing they need is actually support from someone, right? So if it's not the speech therapist, it's the parent, the brother, right? Sort of the guardian that sits next to them and tells them, hey, that went right, that went wrong, in the most basic sense, right? Outside of the real professional support they receive from the speech therapist, but outside of that at home, right? So if you need someone to help you, if you're 3 years old and, right, I even pronounce things weirdly in Dutch, right? So I have an accent, but I don't hear my own accent. Yeah. Imagine if you're very young and you have to overcome these problems. And that's how it was born. So it really came out of this almost a necessity or this feel of urgency, because, right, my colleague had this urgency for his kids, and I had felt the urgency for him and his kids to do something about this. Yeah.
And did you actually tested it out already then? Because he had this problem, right? Did he also see besides the waiting list, if also other people had that problem, or he was just very convinced, hey, let's directly dive into it?
No, so I think if you go back to our story and look at the timeline, we did everything wrong. If you look at it from a startup perspective, right, how you should take this, how you do the entrepreneurial thing, right? So we came at it from more a curiosity perspective and an angle, and we thought, this is actually a very cool problem. First of all, it solves actually a need that I already know 2 kids have, right? So that is already good. But besides that, it's just for us, we saw it at first just as a very cool AI, data science, machine learning type of problem. So we saw it as a hobby project. We just did in, right, sort of almost like the garage, right, sort of in the weekend, in the evening hours. And that's how we got started. So we had no tests whatsoever in the beginning with other children. So these whole, the numbers that I threw out there just before, we only figured it out way later. So that was not the driver at first. We just had this silly sense of, okay, these 2 kids have a problem. Let's solve that. They're not the only 2 kids on the waiting list. That must be, right? Or they were very unlucky, right? So let's try to solve this from that point.
I think a lot of the times, though, when it comes to obsession with a problem, is that no, you're totally. I didn't even notice, and then you did that.
No, sorry.
Maybe it's a little sweaty. The people building solutions just to build solutions and not having a problem. I would say that you guys approached it in the right way, where you knew you had this real, clear, fundamental problem, and the solution is, in the technicalities and everything like that, are less of an issue than they've ever been. But this problem is the thing that needs to be solved the most, with real passion behind it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
The passion was there. Maybe you didn't know, like right now, right, like that a tool or anything built by AI is what's needed. But maybe in the beginning, you could dive directly into something technical, whereas maybe in the speak therapist, sorry, my Dutch word, logopedist is coming by my head. Logopedist, I don't know, it's not even a word.
We're Netherlands Angles friendly, so
mix it's allowed.
Like, what is really their pain points? What are their issues? But like, you can maybe tell a bit how that went along the way, because you said you approached it wrong. Why did you say wrong?
No, so wrong in the sense of like the textbook, like later on we joined Demonstrator Lab, and then we got all these, right, sort of what you also have here at AMS, right, sort of all these courses and workshops, and then they tell you, right, sort of, okay, do many interviews, right, sort of up front with your potential customers to feel their pain points, right, sort of to see it, and back then, right, sort of we just had this
he talks with his children every day, right?
Exactly. But it's also that like n equals 2, or if you look at just the parents' perspective, n equals 1 was our sample size, and that's more what I meant, right? So if I would look at it with all the knowledge I have now, I would have said, amazing, I want to help. But let's also, right, if you have a business idea immediately, I would have said that the better solution or better approach would be to also then first, right, contact some other people and see if they have a similar issue, if it is widespread. Or look up the numbers online, right? So because they are actually publicly available, these waiting list numbers. We didn't find those out ourselves, right? So they're just out there on the internet. But from all the other points, I think we had an amazing journey in that sense, right? So we came we saw a problem, and we had a drive to solve this, right? Sort of, and that also brings out, I guess, the best in you, which keeps it always interesting, fun. You want to keep on working on it. And you feel passionate about it, right? So, I mean, right, as you said before, the podcast is also a bit, right, maybe for people within the startup world, they know all these things, right? Sort of an outside, right? So it might feel a bit daunting. I had that as well. I came from a research background, so no entrepreneurial background before. And then it can be quite daunting to step into that, but you learn along the way. And if you're very passionate about something, if somebody has critique on your idea or stuff, it's okay, right? It's your baby, so it hurts a bit. But it's not immediately that you're let down, right? So I think the biggest problem you can have is if you have this idea that is maybe coming from a money perspective, and somebody blows you then out of the water by saying, yeah, but you know what? I don't believe anybody is going to pay for that. Well, of course, right, sort of we're, at some point a company needs to be viable, right, so financially, and it needs to have, so it needs to solve a problem, but it also, people need to pay, need to be willing to pay for it, for the solution that you offer. But if then somebody says, hey, I think your market is like something negative, right, so I think your market is actually smaller than you tell me that right now, I'm not just sure if you do it from a place where you say like, but I feel almost an existential need to solve this, right, I want to solve this, then you keep on going, and I think you're less easily let down by a negative comment or negative feedback on your idea. So I think that helps a lot if the idea comes a bit from this right sort of internal passion that you have for something, to solve something or to do something good.
No, I think that's like a super healthy way to think about it, though, because passion work obviously is the driver, but then the feedback that you will get, right, when someone's either wanting to give you funding or you're going for grants and non-equity funding as well, right, like you're going to get feedback.
For sure.
And if it's a non-monetary problem that you're trying to solve, like the money facilitates the work that you want to do, but you're trying to solve a non-monetary issue, then even if you help one child, like there's value already driven, right? You know,
especially at the ideation stage, right? So and that's a bit what I talk about, right? So it's not that later on, if somebody tells you your market size is half what you expect, and that's an investor on the other side of the table where you want to close a deal, that's not a good moment, right? So that's not, then you're not happy. But I mean it more in the ideation phase, right? So when you get initial feedback, I think when you have this natural passion for it, no matter where that comes from, right? So passion can come from many different points and places. I think that really helps, because if somebody then tells you, I don't believe so much in it, right? Sort of, you still have that drive and that passion.
Okay, if you don't believe in it,
I will prove you wrong. I will prove you wrong happily.
Yeah.
So I think that is really that's really nice to have.
May I? So that's a bit about the beginning stage right now, right? And I'm curious because you say we started talking also a bit about the money part. Is there already a switch for you where you feel like, okay, the passion now, I'm also looking a bit more at the money part and getting investment, and do I need to change the direction of my business? Do I need to change my passion for that? Like, are you already past that or in that stage? Or?
Definitely. I mean, not on a day-to-day basis, right? Sort of, but yes, these questions pop up internally with ourselves. But also when you get external feedback from an investor or from right at an event, somebody says something. So no, constantly. I mean, we're in a stage where I would say very quickly after your ID phase, right? Sort of, you will, depending a bit on what kind of startup you have, right? So, but if you need external funds to build the initial prototype MVP to go to market, right? So, which you have sometimes that there's a longer runway before you reach the market. Then there's no way around it, right? So if you have to get your focus also on getting funds in, but they also, it's a good thing, right? So I mean, I never saw it as like two opposing factors. For me, they were always, right? So I want the money, or we need the money to make this happen, right? Sort of, and it brings you further. And the same with like sometimes. There's also this, people are scared of investors, right? Sort of, somebody gave me very good advice in the very beginning. I think it was from somebody at D-Lab, and it said they're also humans. And which is actually true, right? Sort of, they also have a family, they also have activities that they like to do outside of work. They're not only investors like 24/7, and they're not that scary. They're very
maybe some vampire investor that's just 24/7.
But right, sort of, if you then so they're not all like that, right? Sort of, so they're actually very very normal, and you can take that feedback and right. So they also bring something very useful besides the money. They also bring this sense of urgency. They put a lot of knowledge into it, right? Sort of, we had we're maybe fortunate that we had some super nice investors that can also help with the follow-ups, and not only follow-up funding I'm talking about, but really like thinking along. So we also had a session with
steps, right?
exactly with,
Yeah.
with our investor, and he said, hey, bring your pitch deck. We're going to sit together for 1.5 hours, right? Sort of, and we're going to look into the future and how are you gonna, right? So I'm going to challenge you. Just for 1.5 hours, I'm going to challenge you. And we're going to build actually a better pitch deck and a better story out of this and a better path towards the future. So they bring also knowledge, expertise, an extra set of pair of eyes, right? Sort of that look a bit critical. And it depends a bit on the investor, of course, but they bring also a lot of extra things. So I think I don't see them as separate. What I said in the beginning, I don't see them as separate factors. So they are really there working together, right? Sort of you're working then together on the passion to bring this further and to bring this to market and make it a big success. And of course, maybe some have more the idea that the success factor is the money, right? Sort of return on investment. Yeah. And then for maybe the other people, it's still a combination, right? Return on investment plus, right? Sort of the impact you make. But also there, right? So if you have impact investors, right? So that actually, and it's a natural selection process. You have naturally that, right? So impact investors find the impact startups, and impact startups try to find most of the times the impact investors.
Well, I think that might be a good kind of segue when it comes to making these connections, right? So I think mentor, it's nice that you're able to find that, right? But like when it comes to being mentored through scaling your company or meeting these investors, I think a lot of people would love to hear how, was it through D-Lab, Demonstrator Lab? Was it through the university? Like, what were the connections and how did you
build that network?
Yeah, so
what's the cheat code?
I don't think there is naturally there's not really a cheat code, but I would say that for us, Demonstrator Lab or joining, like, and it doesn't have to be Demonstrator Lab for the Demonstrator Lab's sake, right? But that's where we are at the VU. That really helped us. It made it more professional for us, right? Sort of, they also provided office space so we could professionalize, right? Sort of in many different ways and forms. But they also offered the connections, right? So they have these investor events. And especially if you, right, sort of come from the outside world, you have no clue what the names of these investment firms are, right? Sort of who to contact and how do you contact them. They can really help you with that. And they can even introduce you from time to time, right? If they have a really good connection with an investor, they can even introduce you to that investor. So that really helps. And with that, you can build your own network further. So I would say I didn't necessarily have a network when I started, but through Demonstrator Lab and expanding on that network, right? They say, hey, we have tickets for this event. We think it might be a cool event for your startup. Do you want to go there? And then they might also have not known any of the investors that were coming there, but through that network, you build then your own network. So it expands naturally. And sometimes it's just pure luck, I must say, right? Sort of.
It's very fair, though.
Yeah. So then it turned out that the partner of the friend of my girlfriend worked at a specific, right, sort of bank, and then, right, sort of we got into contact there. Just as a first introduction, right? Afterwards, you're still scrutinized and, right, sort of, and they go through all the due diligence. But sometimes you also need to be a bit lucky that you meet someone at an event.
Yeah.
Or know someone via, and then you can, because the cold email is always a worse email than the warm email, right?
Yes.
So, and that already helps dramatically. But also I would say don't be afraid to ask people to reach out for you. So we also had that once you get the first investor on board, they say, hey, what are your plans for the future for investment, right? So what are you looking for? And then they could share actually a list with investors they knew. And they said, for all of these, we can actually drop them in a line, right, sort of, and help you with that first contact. And I think that is already a major difference, right? Sort of, if an investor that just invested in you, of course, they have conflict of interest a bit, right? Sort of, but it helps a lot, right? Sort of, then in the future context. So
it's also like such a verification check mark. Like when you get that first investor, right? Like it's somebody's been through the process, somebody's signed on the dotted line, and then it just makes that conversation moving forward, especially sharing it with his friends. I've vetted them. I know we're already good. And it's probably you had some conversations that maybe didn't work out
Of course.
prior to this first guy signing on,
Yeah, of
but
course.
it's just
Yeah.
kind of like continuing
Yeah.
to
Can you
go at it.
Yeah, can you maybe tell us a bit about that? Because I think it's also a bit like every startup is learning by doing, right?
Yeah.
So is it like the first, let's say, go back to the first investor talk or meeting that you had or something?
Yeah, so
Do you remember that stuff?
yeah, so I was very lucky that one of my co-founders, he wasn't from the startup world, but he was from the business side of things. So he had a bit more experience, and at least with the type of people we were dealing with, right? Sort of, and the types of questions they might find they want to ask, or the things they find important. So before the first session, we went there together, which we still do every time. We always go together. We prepped each other a bit, but I would say mostly he prepped me in the beginning, right? So now we prep each other, I would say, because I also learned by doing over time. But especially in the beginning, he had a lot of knowledge about, okay, this is what they probably find important. Okay, what is our story there, right? So that we don't want to do like, for the first 5 minutes when they ask a question, no, you want to be sharp, right? Sort of, and show that you thought about this. And I think that is the main thing. Be confident in those talks, prepare well so that you, and also don't be afraid. And if you didn't expect that question, better to maybe say it, right? Sort of, okay, hey, very interesting question. I haven't looked at it from that perspective. Right, so let me think a bit about that, right? So when I can come back to you with an answer on that later.
And I think that's super valuable. It's kind of like, I think we're seeing it with AI as well. It's like when you hallucinate or, an answer that you don't really know the answer to, and you're just like throwing stuff out there, they're going to see that a lot more than just being like, I don't know, we haven't thought about it. Like obviously you're saying I've thought about other things.
Yeah. That's what you show in your deck.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, I think people feel like they have to have every answer.
Yeah.
And it's not possible, right? Like you can't think through every scenario.
No, and I would say also with that, right? So as an extra point that I learned a bit in the beginning, I have the feeling a lot of people are inclined to always say yes to the feedback, right? Sort of, can't you do this? Yes, we can, right? Sort of, can you maybe go into that market? Yes, we can, right? Sort of, is that not a better business case? Yes, it is, right? Sort of, we are very inclined to say then immediately yes, which might actually not be the answer the other side of the table wants to hear. Whether that is in a normal conversation, whether that's with investors, whether that is with your startup incubator that's trying to help you. Sometimes it's also like, hey, I just thought of that. Is that maybe something viable? And it's also okay for you to politely, of course, right? Always be polite, right? So that say, hey, we thought about that, and for these and these reasons, we think our strategy fits better to this specific market, or that market fits our product better, and that's why we went for this. And then it's also fine, right, sort of that you can still maybe at the end of the talk disagree a bit, right? Sort of, and you can agree to disagree on that. But it also shows, right, many of the times you thought about it, and that's important to highlight, I think, that you really showed that you thought about all these things. And that it doesn't come out of thin air for you, that you know a bit, okay, this is my thought process.
Not just nodding for, okay, I want investments, yes.
It's a bit, right, sort of, if you have to value a company, right, so that if you already Google, there are many ways, right, so theories about valuation, how you should value a company, right, so companies publicly traded, easy, right, sort of, but non-publicly traded or non-traded at all, how do you value those startups or those companies? But at some point, when you talk to an investor, there might be a deal on the table, right? Sort of so much equity you give away for so much money. And then I think it's also very normal that you might have used different approaches, right? Sort of, but it's all then also about the reasoning you have behind it. Hey, we already did this, we proved this, we achieved this. So therefore, if we do these type of calculations, right? Sort of take a bit of an average here, take an average there, we get to this valuation. And it might be that it's slightly off, right? Sort of, but it already shows to an investor that you actually thought about this. And this is something we learned the hard way. We talked to one investor, and they just put at the first meeting, we thought it was an introductory meeting, a valuation out there on the table, and we were a bit like, okay, Thank you very much.
They put a valuation for you.
Yeah,
Really?
and right, sort of, so super right, laid back. They just dropped it there, and we were not prepared for this. We knew that, right, sort of later in the talks, we thought, okay, these talks normally take a couple months at least, so this will come later in the process. So we have still a lot of time to think about this. Now we learned it the hard way. You might not have. A previous investor that we talked to never did this in the first couple of talks that we had with them. And this one did it the first time. So they also have different styles, right? Sort of maybe we want to test the waters a bit, right? Sort of, but I would say prepare always for everything, even how unlikely it might sound. Just think it through, right? So if it doesn't have to be perfect, but it would have, I think, way better from our side if we could have immediately said, okay, yeah, right, sort of that matches roughly our internal own calculations, or maybe immediately say, hey, our calculations differ a bit, let us think about it, right, sort of. But now we actually had to tell them, we said honestly, right, so okay, we're actually not that far yet, we haven't thought internally and talked this through yet, which was a fair answer, but I think it would have been way better and not that much more difficult to have already had that talk internally.
Have a number in mind.
Have a number in mind and a calculation with that. So I think, and this is not just about that topic, but I think that is investor talks, be prepared, right? Sort of, and think also of things you might not think of at first, right? Sort of try to challenge each other then before you go in.
Yeah.
Okay, what have we not thought of, right? Sort of,
and maybe good because you mentioned that you thought of it, right? So probably you had also a financial view over, okay, what do we need to get where? But I think for a lot of people, even from my perspective, I had like a big question mark how to approach that. You just have to ask a number, or based on what is that? You said your co-founder, he had a business background, right?
Yeah.
So is he then also the one who said, okay, I will review it and see which number fits, or did you discuss it together, or?
So normally, so we're a smaller team, of course, as you can imagine. So normally we divide the work a bit. So he was then in the lead of like producing a first estimate of our own, right?
Yeah.
Sort of, if it's still about the valuation. And then we, of course, discuss this with the entire team, which we're now with 4. So we discuss it with the 4 of us. Back then it was still 3, so we discussed it with the 3 of us. And right, so if you discuss it in every detail, so it might be that I have less experience, but I have just a natural feeling that, okay, this doesn't sit well with me if I would have been an investor, right? So I don't like this type of calculation or this type of reasoning. So we can challenge each other on that. But normally we divide the work a bit so that one takes then the lead on a certain element. And of course, we look a bit at past experiences. Of course, now that we're like our first investment we received last year in May, so we're slightly more than a year into the future, right? Going already. So by now, like every person within our co-founding team has also experience now with these type of topics. But of course, you still have experts, right? So it's the same, like as you heard in the beginning, I come from an AI data science background.
Yeah.
One of my co-founders, the one with the children, where we came with, he also has that same background. So for example, when an investor asks us about due diligence for more like the tech stack, yeah, then it's more natural that we start with writing that, right, sort of that slide or right, sort of a PDF or whatever. But of course, we let it still be reviewed by everyone because it's actually also good to get then maybe an outsider perspective, like somebody that doesn't have the natural background in it, but sees then, yeah, okay, but I don't understand this paragraph. Right?
Based on what did you do this? Where did this calculation come from? Or like, can you explain
exactly?
Me? And then when the person shows literally how they build it, and you can say, okay, why did you? And you can start questioning things from
exactly.
outside.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that is very important.
Yeah. And we're both non-technical founders, right? And so you're on the technical side of the co-foundership, and we're on the non-technical side of the co-foundership. But those alternating perspectives really let you see the gaps, right?
I would say so,
And like, I would say from an operational lens, you're even like mapping out, okay, how are we going to scale this? But from a technical lens, you're thinking, okay, how are we going to scale this, framework, right? Like the structure of building the actual product itself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it might be time to kind of like dive into maybe the biggest thing that you've learned so far on this journey.
Yeah.
Do we want to go that? So the idea would be like, we talked about how you founded the company. We talked about how you got to make these networking connections and these funding. But maybe it's like the one thing we're all about trying to give people a head start in this journey is kind of like the one thing that you wish you would have known, right? Like,
I can say an example for me. It literally was I should have validated it way beforehand, to make sure like I can make up an idea that is I really need for my business idea. That's for example my biggest learning. So if I would now, I don't know, tomorrow I started something new, I would first make sure that I test if my assumption is true or other assumptions there are, if there's maybe a different angle on something. So that's maybe my example.
I think that's a very good one, right? Sort of, I think a lot of people will have a natural tendency to do that, right? It also links a bit to what I said in the beginning, right? Sort of that we started with n=2 kids, right? Sort of that we knew that had this problem, but we never validated it until we actually came to the demonstrator lab that it was a broader problem. We always viewed it from a challenging technical perspective and like a moral and like a natural incentive that we felt an urge to solve this for these children, but we never validated it. So I can totally see that would have also something I would have done a bit differently or like quicker, right? Sort of earlier in the process. Yeah. What I would say is, and I have seen this a couple times already, not only with myself, and I still made the same, to a lesser extent, I would say, the same mistake, is you build your first version of the product you're launching, whatever that may be, hardware, software, it applies to everything. You want to make it too good, right? Sort of, like sometimes they say, if you look back on your MVP, you're never proud of it. But in a way, I would even maybe say you shouldn't be proud of it, right? So that's the aim, right? So don't build it so that you're not proud of your MVP. And the reason why I say this is because I have the feeling you spend too long in perfecting without then getting actual real life feedback validation. But also many times, if you look at big companies, right? So we're all thinking about, now these AI models, they can almost do everything, right? These large language models. But if you remember a couple of years ago, they didn't even know how many, right, sort of S's are in strawberry, or right, sort of the R's in there, right, sort of whatever, right, sort of all these things, they couldn't do it. I think what we shouldn't forget is, if I bring it very close to our own product, we can make it work for any accent, for any word in the Dutch language. We can even immediately say, no, we aim already we want to at start have it for 10 different languages. Mm-hmm. Now, very quickly you would say, no, that's a bad idea, Quint, right? So don't do it for 10 languages, focus on one. But even if you think about that, that's already a big task. Why don't you ask speech therapists or, right, sort of your key opinion leaders, right, sort of in your field? Why don't you ask, what are like if you nail it down to 1% of what you need to actually just be able to test it out with.
Key pain points.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for us, it could have been a set of maybe 10 words that they practice a lot, or 10 sounds that they practice a lot. And for those 10 sounds, only 10 words. And we just nailed that MVP. We focus only on that for the first part, launch it such that they can actually use it, and that you get way quicker the feedback. And this doesn't, so now I brought it a bit in the software perspective. This works for any solution, right? So if you think about hardware, that you think, no, this has to be perfect, and right, so
it's going to be this huge thing I'm solving.
Exactly, right? But also the same thing applies for hardware. If you sometimes immediately, like very often with hardware, it's about scalability in terms of the cost perspective, right? Yeah. So in software, it's about scalability potential, because the costs for scaling are actually normally very low. But with hardware, it's a bit different, right? So it's all about the cost of scalability and how costly it is to build a regular machine, make it cheaper, right? Sort of, and these things, how easy it is to do that. And then what you have a lot is that people immediately focus, oh yeah, but at a price point of, let's say, 10 euros per piece of production cost, my product is not viable. It can be, but maybe you can get that for $10, 10 euros per piece production cost. You can get a working MVP that actually users can test and use. You can get up and running in a month. I just make something up, right? And if you want to go to the viable, let's say, €1 per unit production cost, that might take you 1.5, 2 years. Then it actually might be better, actually I think it's always better, to go for the first, make sure that you have an awesome product that people can test and sort of work with. Maybe you make a loss in the beginning, right? So because the production costs are too high, but you know that once you have proven that it works, they are hooked, they like it, right? Sort of you get the validation in, you can actually start scaling back, right? So in terms of how much, build a machine that can reduce the production cost to the number you need it to go to. That will also go in steps. But if you try to do it all at once, you might never launch. And that's a bit with software, it's the same what we said. If we do it immediately for all the words in the Dutch language, all the languages out there and we want to be at all of them, we want to be at 99% accuracy, right? So you might never launch because you run out of money before you reach that. So I think it's good to keep that practicality or the practical aspect of it also in mind. So that this MVP is then, in a sense, you're not proud of it. It was still this very expensive, not usable piece of hardware. It's this very limitedly applicable software piece, but you at least could get to market with it.
Yeah, true. Sorry, to my mind.
No, yeah. I was just gonna say, no, I think it incredibly valuable because I think you're seeing a lot of people trying to get the perfect.
People say, that's what my brain thought, like people say jump before you're ready.
Yeah.
But actually it's like jump even though you're not ready, right? You should just jump. Without, then that's not focus on the ready, just jump and then along the way you will make sure you get to.
And of course it is difficult, right? Because you have to manage much more the expectations. So when we of course also do a pilot, we explicitly brief everyone like, okay, this part of the model we're still working on, right? So that is not optimal yet. So please, right, sort of don't use it with the kids, right? Sort of stuff like that. So you go, and if you build a new feature, right, so you do the same thing. But I think in the beginning, people are indeed scared, so you have to jump into the deep sooner. But I think it's also even deeper than that. Start aiming for, I'm not saying set the bar lower, but you set the bar differently, right? Sort of, it's not like if the end goal is being at a production cost of so much or having accuracy there are very few cases, even the big scale-up startups, right? So they're super successful. They didn't go there in one turn, right? Sort of it was definitely it's iteration after iteration. Yeah. But you need to start somewhere, and that feedback is actually super valuable and super useful. Yeah.
No, I think that's incredibly valuable, and I'm hoping people get to this part of the interview and also take it to heart. You know. Now I think the last thing that we always do, I think thank you for that, is we always see if somebody has an ask that they want to ask the larger audience, right? So, is there anything when it comes to, you can either say it to us or you can say it directly to the camera, but just like, are you looking for pilots? Are you looking for test audience?
You can think about it for a minute.
You can think about it for a minute.
Yeah.
I'll have to go right at it.
That's an interesting question.
You get to promote something.
Yeah. I think I would go for the speech therapist, right? If they want to work with us, right? So please contact us. So I think, so if I can ask one thing to the audience, I hope that in this audience of founders, there are also maybe some speech therapists or people that maybe they know someone that is a speech therapist and they can bring this message forward to them, right? Sort of, and spread the news that we are actually very keen on working with more speech therapists. And at the moment, we're actually hiring speech therapists and residents, not that we want to, right, sort of think, right, so we want to have our own speech therapist internally, but we think it's super valuable to have a couple speech therapists working for us full time, to help us develop this product. So if you are a speech therapist, right, sort of that is thinks about innovation as a cool thing, right? You're enthusiastic for that. You like something different, right? You want an active environment where you can work with the kids, so you can practice your speech therapy and all your knowledge there. But you can also use that knowledge for a good cause in building a better app, right? Sort of a better platform where we can help these children, and the platform is Speaklee. Then we're looking for you. So then I would ask you, join us.
Amazing.
So good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very good pitch. And we'll share the website and how to contact you and stuff.
Yeah.
And so hopefully some people
Put your
reach.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, so we actually have just out today, Pascal put it out today, he's one of the co-founders, a LinkedIn post to these vacancies. So we're looking for 2 speech therapists. So I can send you what Pascal sent me.
Yeah.
I can forward the link.
That's perfect.
And then you can post that as there as well. No, yeah, so that's really for us now. We got a bit of extra funding. So that helps us now to actually be able to hire. We had this already for a long term, that we want a couple, 1, 2, 3 speech therapists. We call them in residence, a bit like how at the Music Institute they have artists in residence, right? Sort of that we have those, so that they can actually expedite this process of getting validation. So if we launch a new feature, we don't need to look for a new pilot partner. No,
You have your pilot partners.
we have our own internal.
Baked in.
It's baked in.
Yeah.
And it also allows us to, for example, have them also, right, sort of test it now with the kids, but later on become brand ambassadors, right? So that they can go to speech therapists and talk about our platform and how amazing it is. And if I tell it, they think, yeah, that's a software guy. And if a speech therapist that uses it says it, then they think like, hey, that must be a cool piece of software, right? So I think
So it will not only help me, but like not only her, but also me.
Yeah, exactly. So that's right. So if you have to think about these things,
No, that's perfect. So yeah, we'll put the word out.
Thank
and
you.
we appreciate you joining.
Thank you for being here.
Of course.
And
Thank you for having me.
Valuable topics. I think it will be
very
a
valuable.
Yeah.
I'm
Thank you
excited
very
in a year to look back in a year and see where you're at.
Yeah. Hopefully we're international then.
Yeah.
Don't say hopefully. You will be international. You will be.
You just have to jump. But until next time.
Until next time.
Okay, thank you.